In the middle of a serious talk, my fiancée said, "You know my ex still loves me, right? Sometimes I think I do too." Without saying a word, I logged into our joint account and moved every dollar into my personal one. When she noticed the balance dropped to zero, I never expected the conversation to unravel the way it did. Vivian and I were sitting at the small dining table in our apartment, surrounded by lists of vendor options and receipts we had collected over the past 3 months. I had worked extra hours to cover everything because we wanted a modest but memorable ceremony, something personal and thoughtful. I believed we were aligned on that. I believed many things that no longer made sense after hearing her speak that afternoon. We were going over the guest list because it kept changing. Every week, she added a handful of people I hardly knew, insisting they were part of her life in ways I didn't understand. I accepted it because I wanted her to feel supported, but the list had grown to the point where it no longer resembled a wedding of two people who cared about each other. It had started to feel like something she was hosting for an audience I had never met. While we discussed seating arrangements, she drifted into a strange silence. She stared at her phone and tapped her finger on the screen with a rhythm that didn't match the moment. When I asked if she was all right, she nodded without looking at me, then set the phone down and leaned back as if the weight of her thoughts pushed her into the chair. She said something I needed her to repeat because it didn't sit right the first time. When she said it again, the words landed with such clarity that the rest of the room lost its shape. She talked about her ex, Jared, and how he still loved her, and how she sometimes believed she loved him too. She said it with the tone of someone commenting on the weather, not someone confessing to the man she planned to marry. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't question how long she had been thinking about him. I didn't ask whether this affected our plans. I simply watched her speak and realized she was waiting for a reaction that would prove something. Maybe she wanted to see if I would panic or beg. Maybe she wanted evidence that I was overly emotional or insecure. There was a strange curiosity in her expression, as if she were testing the ground beneath us. I excused myself to the bedroom, acting as if I needed a moment to breathe or collect papers. She didn't follow. She didn't seem concerned. She continued tapping her phone while I walked away. Inside the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and stared at the login page of the joint account we created for wedding expenses. I had funded the entire thing because Vivian insisted her savings were tied up in tuition loans and overdue bills. I didn't resent it. At least, not before that moment. When the account loaded, I saw the balance. Money earned through overtime shifts, weekend work, and careful budgeting. I thought about the man she claimed still loved her. I thought about her tone when she said she sometimes believed she loved him back. I thought about what it meant for the foundation of our plans. Then I moved the entire amount into my personal savings. It took 2 transfers because of the daily limit, but the bank allowed it since I was the sole contributor. I closed the laptop and returned to the dining table. Vivian continued scrolling through her phone, her expression unchanged. She didn't notice anything until her phone vibrated with a bank notification. She glanced at it casually, then blinked twice and sat upright. Her eyes darted across the screen with rising confusion. She typed something, refreshed the page, then looked at me as if I had turned into a stranger. She asked if I had touched the account. I told her I had moved the funds because the conversation made something clear to me. She demanded to know why I would do that without warning. I repeated her sentence back to her, word for word, and watched her face flicker between anger and regret. She stood so quickly that her chair scraped the floor. She paced the kitchen, pressing her hands to her temples. She said she didn't mean it the way it sounded. She said she was overwhelmed. She said she needed the money to secure a few final arrangements. When I asked which arrangements, she stumbled through explanations that didn't link together. She mentioned flowers we hadn't selected and decor items she never showed me. She claimed she had been trying to surprise me with something sentimental, but she couldn't describe it. Every attempt to justify her previous comment only exposed a deeper layer of uncertainty. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification displayed the updated balance. She looked at it as if hoping it had magically refilled. When it didn't, she went silent. Her silence didn't feel remorseful. It felt tactical. I decided to step out for air. She didn't stop me. She didn't ask where I was going. She sat with her arms folded and eyes fixed on the table, processing the shift in control. I walked to the park near our building, sat on a bench, and tried to understand what had truly happened. It wasn't just about a confession of old feelings. It was about the casual tone she used. It was about the years of conversations where she assured me she was entirely committed. It was about the months of planning she encouraged while apparently holding on to something unresolved. When I returned home, the apartment was quiet. Vivian was in the living room, staring at her tablet. She looked up when I walked in and closed the screen too quickly. The gesture was subtle, but not subtle enough. I recognized that type of panic. It wasn't fear of losing the relationship. It was fear of losing access to something she believed she controlled. Later that night, when she fell asleep on the couch after hours of pacing, I checked the tablet she left open. It had no password because she always claimed she had nothing to hide. What I saw changed the direction of everything. It wasn't a message from Jared. It wasn't a romantic conversation or a confession. It was a reservation. A suite booked at an expensive hotel for the following evening. It was charged to our joint account before I moved the money. The note attached to the reservation included a short line about seeking closure and making peace with the past. It was signed with 2 initials, hers and Jared's. I closed the tablet gently and placed it exactly where she left it. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. The truth had already begun unraveling the moment she decided to test my reaction. The next day would reveal how deep the deception ran and whether she still believed she could manage both sides of the story without consequences. The morning after discovering the hotel reservation carried a strange stillness. Vivian behaved as if nothing had happened, which only confirmed she had no intention of addressing the truth unless someone forced her hand. She brewed coffee, hummed while preparing breakfast, and chatted about the weather as if we hadn't reached a breaking point the day before. Her behavior didn't soothe anything. It sharpened every suspicion I held. I sat at the edge of the kitchen island, watching her move around the room. There was a rhythm to her motions that suggested rehearsed calm. She glanced at her phone every few seconds, waiting for messages she didn't want me to see. The tablet was propped against a cookbook as if she had forgotten what I now knew. Her voice broke the silence when she asked whether I planned to return the wedding funds to the joint account. She phrased it as if it were a routine question. I said no. She dropped the spatula against the counter, not loudly, but with enough intention to show how much the answer affected her. She composed herself quickly and asked why I would jeopardize the entire event over something she considered a moment of emotional confusion. There was no confusion. There was strategy. She wanted access to the money because she had plans scheduled that evening, and without the funds, those plans had become impossible. When she realized I was not bending, her tone shifted into something sharp. She insisted that the wedding vendors needed payment and that the consequences would fall on both of us. I told her every payment I had made came from my account. I suggested she review her own contributions before assuming equal responsibility. Her expression changed instantly. She wasn't used to losing ground. She wasn't used to me placing boundaries she couldn't step over. She left the kitchen without another word and disappeared into the bedroom. Moments later, I heard drawers opening and hangers scraping. She was searching for something. Papers, receipts, anything that would help her locate the financial leverage she believed she deserved. I stepped outside and leaned against the balcony railing. The morning air felt heavier than usual. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was calculating. I needed to decide whether to confront her about the hotel reservation before she acted on it, or to let the situation reveal itself without my interference. When I re-entered the apartment, she had changed clothes and was gathering her bag. She said she needed to pick up a few things for the wedding, adding that she hoped I would reconsider the funds before the day ended. Her voice trembled in a way that didn't come from sadness. It came from urgency. She needed access to something, and she needed it soon. She left quickly. I waited until the front door closed before opening her tablet again. It automatically refreshed the calendar page where the reservation was listed. The time remained unchanged. 7 o'clock that evening. A suite with a fireplace and a private balcony. It wasn't a place for a conversation. It was a place meant to rekindle a fantasy she refused to release. I checked the location sharing feature she always kept active because she liked the safety of knowing where we were. She didn't realize I knew how to access it. It hovered across town, near a cafe she used to frequent with Jared. She wasn't picking up wedding supplies. She was revisiting familiar territory. I didn't chase her. Instead, I let the day unfold. By late afternoon, her location icon drifted toward the hotel district. She wasn't even trying to hide it, which told me she believed she could talk her way out of anything if confronted. She underestimated how much the previous day had changed me. Around 6, I left the apartment and drove to the hotel district. I parked far enough away to avoid being noticed and watched the entrance from across the street. The evening traffic created a shield of movement that made it easy to blend in. At 6:45, Vivian approached the entrance wearing a dress she reserved for dinners at expensive restaurants. Her confidence showed in the way she carried herself. She believed she was in control again. I recognized the expression because I had seen it during moments when she believed she had secured the upper hand. A few minutes after she entered, I stepped into the lobby. I didn't plan to confront her immediately. I only wanted confirmation, solid, undeniable proof. I scanned the room until I spotted her near the reception desk. She wasn't alone. Jared stood beside her. He looked irritated, not affectionate. He spoke with his hands, gesturing towards something on her phone. She tried to calm him. But he stepped back and shook his head with a disbelief that looked older than the moment. I kept my distance, pretending to study the brochures on a nearby display. Their conversation grew more heated. Jared lowered his voice, but the frustration was still visible. Vivian reached for his arm, but he pulled away. He pointed toward the exit as if he was about to leave. Then the first major revelation of the evening broke open. Jared stated clearly enough for me to catch the meaning, even without hearing every word. He wasn't upset because she booked a suite. He was upset because she hadn't told him she was still engaged. He believed she had ended things with me months ago. He believed her story about being trapped in a relationship with an unstable man who wouldn't let her leave. That was why he was backing out. He realized she had crafted an entire narrative to gain sympathy and pull him back into her orbit. Vivian panicked. She pleaded with him to listen. She attempted to pull him toward the elevator, insisting they could sort everything out privately. But he refused. His frustration reached a point where he stepped away from her, hands raised, eyes scanning the lobby for an escape from the scene she was creating. I watched her chase after him in a way I had never seen. Her desperation wasn't romantic. It was rooted in fear. She knew she was losing control twice, once with her ex and once with me. The structure she built, half-truths, financial access, emotional manipulation, was collapsing in public view. I decided to end the uncertainty. I walked toward them. Vivian noticed me first and froze. She attempted to compose herself, but Jared noticed her sudden stillness and followed her gaze until he saw me. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition. He stepped back as if distancing himself from a problem he wanted no part of. Vivian whispered something to him, but he wasn't listening. He looked at me and asked if I was the fiancé. I nodded. He sighed heavily, not out of guilt, but out of exhaustion from the mess he found himself tangled in. He revealed one more truth before stepping away. Vivian had told him I refused to end the relationship even though she tried to leave. She told him I monitored her spending and controlled her movements. She told him she stayed with me out of fear. The reality in front of him made that story collapse instantly. Vivian tried to intervene, but the hotel manager approached, asking if everything was all right. Jared apologized and walked away swiftly, leaving her stranded in the middle of the lobby. She called after him, but he didn't stop. The elevator doors closed behind him, even though he wasn't getting into one. He simply wanted distance. Vivian stood in silence for a long moment before turning toward me. The fear on her face wasn't about losing Jared. It was about losing the stability she believed she could control. Whatever she planned to say, it wouldn't matter. The truth had already begun pulling the structure apart. Vivian didn't speak as we walked out of the hotel. She moved quickly, hoping no one else recognized her or overheard Jared's final words. She kept her head down as though the floor could absorb her embarrassment if she looked hard enough. I followed behind her with measured steps, not rushing, not slowing down, letting the distance between us say what words would have only diluted. When we reached the parking lot, she spun around and demanded to know why I had followed her. There was no remorse in her voice, only frustration at being exposed. She didn't ask how much I had heard. She didn't ask whether I understood the situation incorrectly. She moved straight into the tactic she always used when cornered, the attempt to shift blame. She said I created the problem by draining the account. She argued that she booked the suite for closure and believed Jared deserved an honest conversation in private. She insisted I ruined that by showing up. I didn't interrupt her. I wanted to see how far she would stretch the story before it snapped. When she finished her practice speech, I asked a single question: why she told Jared I was unstable and controlling. Her eyes changed instantly. Her shoulders tightened. She stepped back and scanned the parking lot, hoping for an escape route. She claimed she never said those things. She claimed Jared misunderstood. She claimed emotional distress distorted her behavior. Every excuse she reached for contradicted the one before it. I asked about the lies she told him regarding our engagement. She said she needed time to figure out her feelings. I asked why she booked a suite instead of a restaurant. She said she wanted privacy. I asked whether she ever intended to tell me the truth. She didn't answer. When we reached the car, she refused to get inside until I agreed to talk rationally. She wanted to negotiate reality. She wanted to warp the narrative into something manageable. I unlocked the door without responding and drove us home in silence. Inside the apartment, she didn't collapse in guilt or break into apologies. She went straight to the bedroom and gathered every envelope, receipt, and binder we used for the wedding. She spread them across the living room floor like pieces of an argument she hoped she could still win by reshuffling. She demanded to know exactly how much I had transferred and how much remained. She acted as if the situation were a financial setback rather than the collapse of a relationship. She insisted the vendors needed deposits. She insisted the timeline was fragile. She insisted the wedding couldn't be postponed. I reminded her that she had just admitted feelings for another man. She waved it off. She said it was a moment of honesty that had no bearing on our future. She said many couples go through that phase. She described it as confusion, as nostalgia, as emotional turbulence. Every label she used distanced her from responsibility. I walked into the bedroom to retrieve a set of receipts I hadn't shown her before. These were the ones listing the major payments I had already made. When I returned, she was on the phone, crying loudly to her mother. She painted herself as a victim whose fiancé took away the wedding funds out of spite. She said I was sabotaging the ceremony because I felt inadequate. Her mother didn't ask for proof. She didn't ask for my perspective. She simply declared she was driving over. Vivian hung up and glared at me as if reinforcements would tilt the balance back in her favor. Her mother arrived within 30 minutes. She walked in with the confidence of someone who believed she could shame me into compliance. She didn't greet me. She went straight to Vivian and embraced her dramatically. Then she turned to me and demanded an explanation for the missing funds. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I handed her the receipts. The full list of payments I had made, line by line. She scanned them and shifted uncomfortably, realizing the numbers didn't match the version of events Vivian described. Vivian tried to interject, claiming the receipts were misleading. I handed her mother the second set. Emails from vendors confirming cancellations that Vivian initiated without telling me, along with estimated costs for new, more extravagant arrangements she attempted to book behind my back. Her mother's expression changed from outrage to disbelief. She turned to Vivian and asked whether she had really tried to move the ceremony to a more expensive venue. Vivian shrugged as if it were trivial. She insisted she did it for the aesthetic she wanted and thought I would eventually understand. I added one more detail, the part that shifted the entire room's atmosphere. I explained that Vivian attempted to add Jared to the guest list after reaching out to him behind my back. I said she framed it as closure, but that her behavior in the hotel lobby suggested another motive. Vivian's mother froze. She looked at her daughter as if seeing her clearly for the first time in months. She asked why Vivian would invite an ex to her own wedding. Vivian said she wanted to prove she had moved on. Her mother didn't buy it. Then the moment hit that forced everything into a full unravel, the hotel suite. I explained calmly that Vivian used the joint account to book an expensive suite for herself and her ex the night before. I didn't dramatize it. I simply stated it. Her mother shifted from confusion to anger. She stared at her daughter with a mix of betrayal and shock. Vivian tried to deny it, then tried to minimize it, then tried to justify it. Each attempt revealed another crack in the facade. Her mother stepped aside, muttering that she needed air, and walked onto the balcony. Vivian followed her, crying and begging her to understand. I remained in the living room, waiting for the next inevitable collapse. When her mother returned inside, she didn't comfort Vivian. She told her she was irresponsible, reckless, and manipulative. She said she had embarrassed their family and nearly destroyed the wedding before it happened. Vivian's panic doubled. She rushed back to me, insisting the events were being misinterpreted. She tried to grab the receipts from my hand, but I stepped back. She lunged forward again, attempting to pull them away. Her desperation was raw, but not remorseful. It came from losing control. When she couldn't take the receipts, she blocked the hallway to keep me from getting to the bedroom. She stood with her arms out, trembling with frustration. She said we needed to fix this together before things escalated further. She said she could repair the relationship if I just trusted her again. She didn't understand trust wasn't something she could rebuild with the same hands she used to dismantle it. I told her I already called the property manager earlier that afternoon. I would be moving out the next day. Her legs gave out, and she sat on the floor with her back against the wall. She didn't react with sorrow. She reacted with fear. Fear of losing the financial stability she had wrapped herself in. Her mother didn't help her up. She didn't say anything. She simply walked to the door and left without turning back. The apartment went quiet except for Vivian's shaking breaths. She whispered something, but I didn't respond. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door, ending the argument without raising my voice. The only thing left was the final break, and that would come sooner than she expected. I woke early the next morning to the sound of Vivian moving through the kitchen. Her footsteps had a frantic rhythm, softer than the night before, but still charged with tension. She wasn't preparing breakfast. She was pacing, opening drawers, closing them, opening the fridge and shutting it again without taking anything out. Every motion carried the weight of someone trying to rearrange a collapsing narrative. When I stepped into the room, she straightened abruptly. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but the expression she wore wasn't remorse. It was calculation. She asked me to sit down so we could revisit the situation with a clear mind. She insisted everything had spiraled out of proportion and argued that weddings often create emotional distortions. She claimed the hotel suite was a misguided attempt to resolve tension and close a chapter before starting a new one. I let her speak. She built her explanation piece by piece, hoping one brick would cover the cracks of the previous one. She didn't realize that every new justification contradicted her earlier claims. She said she booked the suite for closure, but also said she booked it because Jared needed reassurance. She said she didn't intend to meet him there, but also admitted she wanted clarity before making a lifelong commitment. I asked why she never told me about the call she received from him the week before, the one she mentioned in the tablet messages. She paused. Her eyes wandered to the window, as if searching for a version of the story she had forgotten to invent. Eventually, she claimed she didn't want to upset me. I asked why she told him I was unstable. She said it was an exaggeration brought on by frustration. She wasn't convincing herself, let alone me. When she realized her explanations were unraveling, she changed her strategy. She sat at the table, folded her hands, and lowered her voice as if delivering a confession that deserved sympathy. She said she had made mistakes, but everything could still be repaired with time and patience. She asked me to restore the funds temporarily so she could fix things with the vendors. She argued that canceling the wedding now would embarrass both families, especially hers. The entire speech centered around image, plans, and consequences, not love, not partnership, not accountability. It became clear she didn't fear losing me. She feared losing the lifestyle, stability, and social approval the wedding symbolized. I told her I was leaving that afternoon. Her composure shattered instantly. She stood so quickly her chair tipped back. She blocked the doorway again, hands trembling. She begged me to reconsider the decision, saying people make mistakes in moments of weakness. She declared that halting the wedding would destroy her reputation. She still didn't mention how the situation affected me. Everything was framed around what she stood to lose. I walked past her without touching her. She followed close behind, talking rapidly, insisting we could salvage the relationship if we avoided telling anyone else. She said her mother overreacted and needed time to cool down. She said she would handle Jared. She said we could pretend none of it happened if we wanted to. I didn't reply. I gathered my documents, the remainder of my clothes, and a few personal items. When I returned to the living room, she was holding the engagement ring with both hands. She asked whether leaving meant the engagement was over. The question was rhetorical. She knew the answer. I told her to keep the ring. It had lost its purpose. She tried to hand it back, insisting it wasn't about material things. The irony didn't escape me. I placed it gently on the counter beside her and stepped back. She stared at it, as if expecting it to speak on my behalf. She switched tactics again. Her voice rose. She accused me of sabotaging the relationship because I wanted control. She accused me of transferring the funds to punish her. She accused me of misinterpreting harmless actions. She framed herself as a victim of my overreaction, a phrase that only cemented everything I had already concluded. When her accusations didn't change my decision, she threatened to tell her family that I emptied the joint account out of spite. She claimed they would believe her. I nodded calmly and told her they could access the records themselves. Every contribution came from me. Every withdrawal she made was logged. Every vendor she contacted had a paper trail. She froze. She had forgotten about the invoices. I told her I had already spoken with 2 major vendors the previous evening after arriving home. They had confirmed her attempts to change venues and add new services without notifying me. They had documented everything. Her panic rose again, but now it carried a new layer, fear of exposure, not loss. She asked whether I intended to reveal the details to her family. I told her that transparency would be necessary if she tried to blame me publicly. She collapsed into a chair, staring at the floor. Her breathing slowed, and the fight drained out of her. It wasn't acceptance. It was resignation. She understood the dynamic had shifted permanently. Her mother returned unexpectedly around noon. She entered the apartment slowly, as if unsure whether she had the right to step inside. When she saw Vivian slumped in the chair, she approached cautiously. She didn't speak until she noticed my packed bags near the door. She looked at me first and asked if everything she heard from vendors and relatives was true. Her voice carried exhaustion. I confirmed it without elaborating. Vivian sat upright and tried to defend herself, but her mother raised a hand to silence her. She didn't yell. She didn't insult her daughter. She simply said she couldn't support behavior that destroyed not only a relationship, but also the trust of everyone involved. She said Vivian needed to come home for a while until she settled her finances and her emotions. Vivian refused, insisting she could still fix the situation. She reached for her mother's arm, but her mother stepped away. She repeated the same instruction: pack your things and come home. Vivian broke down, not with sorrow, but with rage. She accused both of us of conspiring against her. She claimed everyone was misjudging her intentions. She said the pressure of the wedding caused her actions. She insisted the hotel suite was harmless. Her arguments tangled together, each one weakening the last. Her mother didn't argue. She simply waited for Vivian to run out of excuses. I took the opportunity to leave. I carried my bags to the door, opened it, and paused briefly. Vivian looked at me with the expression of someone watching a foundation crumble, not because she cherished the structure, but because she depended on it. I told her I wished her well. That was all. No declarations, no promises, no explanations. I walked out. The consequences unfolded quietly over the next few weeks. Friends reached out with questions after hearing fragments of the story from relatives. I answered only what was necessary. I didn't embellish. I didn't accuse. I simply confirmed the facts. Vivian moved back with her mother. The vendors canceled her attempted upgrades and flagged her account for suspicious activity. Jared blocked her after discovering the lies she told both of us. Her reputation in her family's circle weakened. There was no dramatic collapse, just a slow erosion of trust that settled into her life like dust. As for me, I settled into a new apartment, restored my finances, and returned to a routine that felt stable again. I didn't celebrate. I didn't dwell. I allowed the quiet to return. In time, the sharpness of the experience dulled, but the clarity remained. The moment she admitted loving someone else wasn't the betrayal. The true fracture came when she revealed how confidently she believed she could manipulate every part of the story. My role, her ex's role, her mother's perception, and even the wedding itself. Leaving wasn't an escape. It was the first honest step the relationship had seen in months.
It wasn't, you're going to have to stop. It was like, why do you do this to yourself all the time? Because, it was bonkers. It took 14 years before I realised, I thought I was going to get a different ending. I'm just going to get the same ending everybody gets. And I could definitely tell that there's only one way this goes. There's a point where your reward system gets dysregulated and the amount you need, like, I don't feel that great now. I reckon by there on the next one, that's when the party's really going to start, or that's when I'm going to feel better about my day. I'm this far down on the next one, but you never get there. All right, it just keeps elusively moving away from you. But it was